I was lying on the frozen ground at the bottom of a wide stone staircase, my body shaking uncontrollably, my arms wrapped around my newborn daughter. She was only 3 days old. Her tiny cries were growing weaker by the second, swallowed by the wind and the storm. Just moments earlier, the front doors of a mansion had slammed shut above us. My husband's family had dragged me out of their house, down those stairs, and thrown us into the snow like garbage. They called me worthless. They called me a mistake. They said people like me never belonged in their world. No coat, no phone, no car. Barely conscious, still bleeding from surgery, holding a baby who was turning dangerously quiet in my arms. I truly believed we were going to die there. My name is Kate Sullivan. And what the people who abandoned us in that snow did not know was this. 4 hours later, I would become the sole heir to a massive fortune they desperately needed to survive. 4 hours later, every ounce of power they thought they owned would quietly transfer into my hands. They thought they had erased me. They thought I was nothing. They thought they were untouchable. But that night was not the end of my life, it was the beginning of their collapse. This is not a story about revenge fueled by rage. It is a story about patience, truth, and the moment when people who abuse power are finally forced to face the consequences of their own actions. If you have ever been dismissed, humiliated, or treated as disposable, stay with me. Because the woman they left bleeding in the snow is not the woman who walked back into their world. And before this ends, every single lie they told will come apart in front of everyone. Before that night, before the snow and the silence and the fear, I was just Kate Sullivan. No famous last name, no safety net, no powerful family waiting in the background. I grew up in a small working-class town where people measured success by effort, not status. My mother worked long shifts at a local clinic. My father fixed machines in a warehouse until his back gave out. We did not have much, but we had rules. You show up. You tell the truth, you do not look down on people. I carried those rules with me into adulthood. I paid my own way through school, I worked while studying, I learned how to live carefully, quietly, responsibly. I never expected luxury, I only wanted stability, respect, and a family of my own. That was when I met Michael Reeves. Michael was charming in the way people with money often are, confident, polished. He spoke about his future as if it were already guaranteed. When he told me he loved me, I believed him. When he asked me to marry him, I thought I had been chosen. What I did not understand then was that I was not marrying just a man. I was marrying his world, a world built on appearances, control, and unspoken hierarchies. A world where last names mattered more than character, and silence was expected from those who did not belong. From the very beginning I felt it. The subtle pauses in conversation when I spoke. The way his mother studied my clothes. The questions about my parents, my education, my background, all framed as curiosity, but sharpened with judgment. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself love required adjustment. I told myself if I tried hard enough, if I stayed patient enough, if I stayed quiet enough, I would eventually be accepted. I had no idea that my willingness to endure would later be used as proof that I deserved what was coming. And I had no idea how dangerous it is to mistake tolerance for kindness in a family that sees weakness as permission. Marriage did not warm that house. It exposed it. From the outside, the Reeves family looked flawless. A large home, perfectly trimmed lawns, formal dinners with polished smiles. Inside, everything was measured, every word, every movement, every decision. Patricia Reeves ran the household with quiet authority. Her voice was calm, but nothing about her was gentle. She believed order meant control and control meant respect. From the moment I moved in, she made it clear that I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Howard Reeves was less subtle. He spoke to me as if I were an employee. Questions were commands, opinions were corrections, praise was non-existent. He valued money, influence, and obedience in that order. Lauren Reeves watched everything. She smiled when adults were present and mocked me when they were not. She filmed moments she thought were embarrassing. She laughed when I made mistakes. She treated my discomfort as entertainment. And Michael stood in the middle of it all. He was not cruel in loud ways. He was cruel in silence. When his mother corrected me, he looked away. When his father dismissed me, he changed the subject. When his sister laughed, he pretended not to hear it. Money became another form of control. My access to it disappeared slowly. First, joint accounts became his accounts, then spending required approval, then questions were met with irritation. I was told it was normal, that families like theirs handled finances differently, that I should be grateful to be provided for. The house itself felt cold no matter the season. I learned which rooms I was allowed to use and which ones I was not. I learned when to speak and when silence was safer. I learned how to make myself smaller so that I would not cause tension. Each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time I told myself marriage was compromise. But compromise requires two people bending. In that house, only one of us ever did. By the time I became pregnant, I was already living like a shadow, present, useful, and easily ignored. And the quieter I became, the more they seemed to believe that this was my natural place. They mistook my restraint for weakness. And they were very wrong. The hospital should have been the safest place in my life. I had just undergone a difficult emergency surgery. My body was weak and unsteady. Every breath pulled against stitches that burned deep inside me. My daughter lay beside me in a small clear bassinet, her skin still pale and fragile, her life just beginning. Michael did not come. Hours passed, then an entire day. Nurses avoided my eyes, their voices softened when they spoke to me. I kept telling myself he was busy, that something important must have delayed him. I was wrong. Late that night, a nurse I trusted quietly showed me her phone. On the screen was Michael smiling beside another woman. They were dressed for an expensive dinner. His arm rested comfortably around her waist. The caption spoke of new beginnings and honesty. I felt something inside me collapse. Before I could process it, the door to my room opened. Patricia Reeves entered first, perfectly dressed, her expression controlled. Howard followed, then Lauren stepped in, her phone already raised, the camera pointed directly at me. Michael was not with them. Patricia spoke calmly, as if she were discussing logistics. She said they were concerned about my mental state. She said motherhood was clearly overwhelming for someone like me. She said they had already spoken to people who agreed that my daughter would be safer with them. Howard placed a folder on my bed. Inside were documents I had never seen, statements I had never made, claims that I was unstable, that I was unfit, that temporary custody needed to be reassigned immediately for the baby's protection. I tried to sit up, pain shot through my body. Lauren moved closer, filming my confusion, my weakness, my fear. She spoke softly to her audience, explaining that this was what happens when people try to trap men like her brother. I asked where Michael was. Patricia answered without hesitation. He agreed this was best. They told me I could cooperate or make things difficult. They told me doctors would support their version. They told me if I loved my child, I would sign. I was exhausted, medicated, terrified. My hands shook as I held the pen. I signed because I was afraid that if I did not, I would lose my daughter forever. When they left, the room felt empty in a way I had never known. The hospital lights hummed quietly above me. My daughter slept beside me, unaware that the people meant to protect her had just turned her into leverage. That was the moment I understood something painful and permanent. This family did not want peace. They wanted control, and they were willing to destroy me to get it. What followed was not a single act of cruelty. It was years of it. After the hospital, nothing was ever said out loud, but everything changed. I was allowed to stay, but only in the way furniture is allowed to remain in a room, useful when needed, invisible when not. I was no longer introduced as Michael's wife. I was described as someone he married during a difficult phase. a mistake that everyone was expected to politely ignore. At family gatherings, I served food while everyone else sat. If I reached for a chair, Patricia would gently remind me that there were still guests to attend to. When I finished, the conversation had already moved on without me. Gifts became jokes disguised as generosity. One year, Michael handed me a box at Christmas. Inside was a household appliance. Everyone laughed. Patricia said at least now I had something practical. Michael smiled as if it were harmless fun. Money was never discussed with me. I was given a monthly allowance and told it was generous. If I asked questions, I was accused of being ungrateful. If I stayed quiet, it was taken as agreement. Lauren recorded everything she found amusing. My exhaustion, my mistakes, my silence. Sometimes I saw clips of myself posted online without context, framed as humor. Strangers laughed at moments I barely remembered. Michael watched it all happen. When I tried to talk to him, he said I was too sensitive, that his family did not mean harm, that I should try harder to fit in. He said things would improve if I stopped causing tension. So I did what many people do when they are slowly being erased. I adapted. I learned how to swallow words before they reached my mouth. I learned how to apologize for things I did not do. I learned how to make myself smaller so others would feel larger. By the time I became pregnant, I no longer recognized my own voice. And by then, they had already decided exactly how disposable I was. They just had not chosen the moment to prove it yet. The day everything finally broke was cold long before the snow began. I returned to the Reeves house to collect my things. I told myself I would be calm. I told myself I would take only what was mine and leave quietly. I did not want conflict. I did not want a scene. I was wrong to think I would be allowed to leave with dignity. As soon as I stepped inside, I was told to wait in the main hall. The space was vast and echoing, designed to impress and intimidate. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, family portraits staring down like silent judges. Patricia stood at the center of the room, Howard beside her. Lauren leaned against the railing above, phone already in her hand. Michael was there too, standing off to the side, his eyes fixed on the floor. Patricia spoke first. She said, before I left, I needed to apologize. For embarrassing the family, for creating instability, for trying to claim a life I was never meant to have. I said no. Her expression hardened. Howard stepped forward and said this did not have to be difficult, that if I cooperated, things could remain civil, that my future access to my child depended on my behavior. That was when they took my baby from my arms. I screamed. Instinct took over. Pain tore through my body as I tried to hold on. Someone pulled my arms back. Someone else lifted my daughter away. Her cry pierced the room. Lauren filmed everything. Patricia told me to kneel. I refused again. The next moments blurred together, hands on my shoulders, my feet slipping on the marble, my body dragged forward as if I weighed nothing at all. I felt the sharp pull at my surgical stitches, warmth spreading where it should not have been. The front doors opened. Cold air rushed in like a wall. They did not push me once. They pushed me again and again down the stone steps. My body struck the edge of each one. My shoulder slammed hard. My breath left me in broken gasps. I landed at the bottom in the snow, stunned, unable to move. Someone threw my bag after me, its contents scattered across the ground. Medications, diapers, the few clothes I owned. Then my baby was placed against my chest. Patricia stood at the top of the stairs and looked down at me. She said this was where people like me belonged. The doors closed. The house went silent. The storm did not. I lay there, shaking, bleeding, holding my child close as the snow soaked through my clothes. I could not feel my fingers. I could barely feel my legs. And for the first time, the thought formed clearly in my mind. They did not just want me gone. They wanted me erased. Time stopped making sense after that. The cold crept in slowly, then all at once. My teeth chattered so hard my jaw ached. I pulled my daughter closer, pressing her tiny body against my chest, trying to shield her from the wind with nothing but my own warmth. Her cries grew softer. That terrified me more than the pain. I remember thinking that if I closed my eyes, even for a moment, I might not open them again. I whispered to her over and over that it would be all right, even though I no longer believed it myself. Then headlights cut through the storm. At first I thought I was imagining them, but the light grew brighter, steady, deliberate. A dark SUV slowed near the bottom of the driveway, another followed, then a third. Doors opened before the engines even shut off. A man in a long coat moved toward me quickly, ignoring the snow soaking through his shoes. He knelt beside me without hesitation, his voice calm but urgent. "Kate Sullivan," he said, "we have been looking for you." I could barely speak, my lips felt numb. I asked who he was, how he knew my name. He told me his name was Daniel Foster. He said he was there on behalf of my family. When I tried to tell him he had the wrong person, he gently stopped me. "Your mother's family," he said, "your grandfather." Behind him, paramedics moved with practiced precision, thermal blankets wrapped around us. Someone carefully checked my daughter's breathing, another stabilized my shoulder. Warmth slowly returned, painfully, like pins and needles beneath my skin. As they lifted us into the vehicle, Daniel stayed beside me. He told me the truth in pieces, slowly, as if afraid too much information would overwhelm me. The man who had sent him had passed away earlier that morning, and I was the only person he had left everything to. As the doors closed and the vehicle pulled away from the house behind us, I looked back once through the frost-covered window. The Reeves home stood silent on the hill. They had no idea what was coming. Not yet. I woke up in a room that did not feel real. Soft light filtered through tall windows, the air was warm and quiet. Machines hummed steadily around me, not in alarm but in assurance. My daughter slept safely nearby, wrapped in clean blankets, her chest rising and falling in a calm, even rhythm. For the first time since that night, I allowed myself to breathe. Daniel Foster returned a few hours later, carrying a slim leather folder. He did not rush. He spoke carefully, as if every word mattered. And he told me my grandfather's name was Charles Sullivan. A man I had never met, a man my mother never spoke about, a man who had spent decades building a private business empire after losing contact with his only child. My mother had walked away from that world when she was young, choosing a quieter life and a different name. When she died, the connection was lost again. Or so I thought. Daniel explained that my grandfather had found me years ago. He had watched quietly. He had made sure I was protected in ways I never knew, and when he passed away, his will was clear. There were no shared beneficiaries. I'm a distant cousin. No legal disputes waiting in the wings. Everything he owned transferred to one person. I did not feel excited. I did not feel triumphant. I felt stunned. Numbers were mentioned. Companies, properties, trusts structured to activate immediately. Lawyers and boards already notified. Every detail prepared, long before that night in the snow. Daniel told me something else. The Reeves family had applied for a financial agreement with one of my grandfather's companies months earlier, a deal they believed would save them. They were waiting for approval. They had no idea that the person who now held that decision had been the woman they'd dragged down their stairs. I closed my eyes and let that truth settle. I did not smile. I did not speak. Because for the first time in my life I understood something clearly. Power does not announce itself. It waits. The next 8 weeks were not about revenge. They were about survival. My body healed first, slowly, painfully, physical therapy for my shoulder, careful monitoring after surgery, learning how to hold my daughter without fear that my arms would give out, learning how to sleep without waking in panic at every sound. While my body recovered, my mind began to work. Daniel introduced me to people who did not flatter me or pity me. They explained things plainly: financial reports, legal structures, responsibilities that came with ownership. I listened more than I spoke. Asked questions, simple ones, honest ones. What do I control? What do I not control? What happens if I make the wrong decision? No one laughed. No one dismissed me. They answered. I spent long afternoons reading documents while my daughter slept nearby. I learned how companies breathe, how money moves, how power hides in details most people ignore. I learned that influence is not about volume but about timing. The transformation on the outside came later. Clothes that fit my body instead of shrinking it. Posture training so I stopped folding inward. A quiet confidence that came from knowing where I stood, not from pretending. I did not practice speeches. I practiced silence. I learned how to listen without reacting, how to let people reveal themselves, how to wait. Most importantly, I learned restraint. Every instinct in me wanted to strike back immediately, to expose everything, to scream the truth into the world. But Daniel warned me that haste would weaken my position. So I waited. While the Reeves family argued among themselves, I rebuilt myself piece by piece. While they assumed I had disappeared, I became someone they would never recognize. By the end of 8 weeks, I was no longer the woman who begged to be heard. I was the woman who decided when the conversation would begin and when it would end. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The Reeves family believed it was their last chance. They arrived early, dressed carefully, carrying the confidence of people who were used to walking into rooms where others adjusted themselves. They thought this meeting was about money. They thought it was about leverage. They thought they were negotiating from a position of experience. They did not know who they were meeting. The boardroom was large and quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A long table stretched across the room, already occupied by several executives who did not speak as the Reeves family took their seats. Michael sat beside his parents. Lauren scrolled through her phone, bored. Patricia adjusted her posture, preparing to lead the conversation. Howard reviewed documents, certain this deal would stabilize everything that was slipping away. The chair at the head of the table remained empty. Patricia cleared her throat and began to speak, introducing their family business, outlining their needs, framing their situation as temporary setbacks caused by market conditions. No one interrupted her. When she finished, the door behind them opened. Footsteps crossed the room slowly and deliberately. I took my seat at the head of the table. The silence that followed was not immediate recognition, it was confusion. Patricia frowned slightly. Howard leaned forward. Michael looked at me as if trying to remember a name he had not bothered to learn. Then understanding arrived. Patricia went pale. Lauren dropped her phone. Michael stood halfway out of his chair before sinking back down. I introduced myself calmly. My name is Kate Sullivan. I am the majority shareholder and acting chair of this board. You applied for financial support from one of my companies. Today we are here to discuss whether that support will be granted. Howard tried to speak. His voice failed him. I continued. I spoke about numbers they knew and numbers they did not, about debts quietly transferred, about agreements reviewed and paused, about decisions waiting for a signature. Mine.
I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply laid the truth on the table.
This meeting was never about a deal. It was about accountability. The people who once decided my value without consequence were now sitting across from me, unable to interrupt, unable to escape, finally forced to listen. And for the first time they understood exactly who they had thrown into the snow. What happened next was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no threats, no satisfaction taken in watching anyone fall apart.
I told him the truth.
Every action I had taken was legal, every document reviewed, every transfer approved, every pause deliberate. I did not need to destroy them. Their own decisions had already done that work. I explained that authorities had been notified where laws were broken, that independent audits were underway, that the custody arrangement they had forced would be reviewed with evidence they could no longer suppress. Michael finally spoke. He asked why I was doing this. I told him I was not. This was not revenge. Revenge requires emotion. What stood in that room was consequence. I had not dragged anyone into the cold. I had not forged documents. I had not recorded humiliation for entertainment. I had not abused power when someone was weakest. All I had done was refuse to disappear. I made one thing clear before the meeting ended. There would be no personal negotiations, no apologies traded for silence, no quiet settlements.
From who did not care about last names.
When I stood to leave, no one followed. They remained seated, staring at the table, finally understanding that the rules they had relied on no longer protected them. Justice does not rush. It waits. And then it arrives without asking permission. Life did not suddenly become perfect after that meeting, but it became quiet in a way I had never known. The noise of fear faded first, the constant tension in my chest eased. I no longer woke up wondering what I had done wrong or how I needed to adjust myself to survive the day. My daughter came home. That was all that truly mattered. We moved into a small, private place where no one watched my movements or questioned my worth. Mornings became simple, feeding her, holding her, watching her sleep without fear that someone would take her from my arms. I rebuilt my life with intention, not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but to create stability where there had once been chaos. I established a foundation focused on supporting women navigating legal systems that often fail them, quiet work, practical help, lawyers, counselors, safe housing, the kind of support I had needed when no one was listening. I kept my involvement personal but private.
I did not give interviews. I did not tell my story publicly. I did not need validation.
The Reeves family faded from my life in the most fitting way possible. Not through spectacle, but through irrelevance. Their influence dissolved, their voices lost weight, their control vanished. What remained was clarity. I was no longer defined by what I endured. I was defined by what I chose next. And for the first time, the future felt like something I was allowed to look forward to. I want to leave you with this. Most people think power looks loud, aggressive, ruthless. They believe strength is proven by how hard you strike back. I learned something different. Real power is the ability to survive without becoming what tried to destroy you. It is the patience to wait until the truth can no longer be ignored. It is knowing that dignity does not require permission from anyone who never respected you in the first place. When I was left in the snow, I believed every cruel word they had ever said about me. I believed I was small, disposable, easy to erase.
I was wrong.
And if you are listening to this while doubting your own worth, while feeling trapped, humiliated, or unseen, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak for enduring. You are not foolish for hoping. And you are not nothing just because someone treated you that way. Sometimes the moment that breaks you is the moment everything quietly begins to change. If someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from or what you would have done in my place. And subscribe to The Art of Revenge, because the next story will remind you of something just as important. No one gets to decide your value. Not